Welcome to the results presentation for the 6th annual LA Raptor study. The study continues to mature from its infancy in 2017. The Raptor team staff expanded this year to now include Nareeb Katz, which has been extremely helpful to all of us. The study continues to benefit the team and volunteers learning all the new tricks in the field for finding and monitoring nests. It's not all that easy out there, and many of the volunteers know that so well. What has fueled the expansion of this study is mainly, though, our dedicated force of trained volunteers, and our returning volunteers are especially appreciated. It's a good addiction, and I have the same problem. A big thank you from Friends of Griffith Park to all the volunteers, and the pizza party is on Sunday. But yes, we do need to further beef up the number of community science volunteers for next season. It's very gratifying to me personally to bring in new energetic volunteers, and this year was no exception, helping great new volunteers starting off in the field. Many of you may know that Friends of Griffith Park has a dedicated website for the Raptor study. Board members Catherine Louise and Brenda Rees continue to add new content and resources. We hope you'll join Friends of Griffith Park in other programming and work as well. And if you'd like to support us, we'll be opening up our annual membership roster for year 2023 on October 1st. Now let me introduce the team. Our project director is Dr. Daniel Cooper. Dan studied at Harvard and USC Riverside and has a PhD with work completed at UCLA. Dan wrote the first ever Griffith Park Wildlife Management Plan for the Department of Recreation and Parks in 2007, and is Friends of Griffith Park scientific director. He has overseen about a dozen surveys and studies in Griffith Park, and has, it's part of our focus to protect the park through science. All of these surveys and studies are posted on our website. He's made a huge impact in documenting Griffith Park's natural resources, and we're so lucky to have him. Dan is also senior conservation ecologist with the Resource Conservation District. Courtney McCammon has been with the study since the first year in 2017 as well, and came to us with previous Raptor experience at that time. She holds her undergrad and master's from Loyola Marymount. What's thrilling is that Courtney is now the city's first park ecologist for all city parks under Los Angeles Recreation and Parks Department. That happened earlier this year, and we're ecstatic that she was selected for the position. Nareeb Katz was added to her team as outreach director after enthusiastic efforts as a volunteer for several years. She holds an MBA and master's in public policy from UCLA and a BA in environmental education from Humboldt State University. Nareeb is UCLA's first chief sustainability officer and an instructor in the UCLA Extension Sustainability Certificate Program. Courtney will start us off tonight, and we'll now be sharing some slides. To keep things tidy tonight, questions should go into the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen and not into the chat, please. So Courtney, if you're ready, we can take it away here.
Thank you so much, Jerry. So I'm going to share my screen. And hopefully everybody can see that. So thank you, Jerry, so much for that wonderful introduction. So I'm going to share with you guys some Raptor basics, which you may or may not know. And so I wanted to start with the purpose of this study, which, as Jerry may have mentioned, is 6 years strong. So the purpose of it really is to study these important indicator species that we call raptors. We also are very interested in developing a baseline data set of nesting raptors within Los Angeles. This is really one of the first examples of an effort of this magnitude within the LA region. We are very interested in minimizing human-wildlife conflict while still encouraging recreation within our entire study area, and especially Griffith Park. We always use this information to inform management, and I think that that relationship has gotten stronger with me as the urban ecologist with recreation and parks. So we do disseminate this information to different avenues of management within different people that manage these parks, and they use it to further these species along while still maintaining recreation within them. We also are contributing to regional species assessments. So Dan is going to talk about that later, but the Nest Watch program, is in collaboration with a similar study in New York. And so we really just want to contribute to a larger data set while maintaining the one that we have here in Los Angeles. And I can't, oh, next. So here are the subregions of the study area. So when it first began, Griffith Park was really our focal area, and it has since grown. We now include the valley, we include the eastern Santa Monica Mountains to the 405, and we've extended that a little bit this year. We kind of swing around. We include mid-city Los Angeles and the Baldwin Hills, and we go all the way over to Pasadena, Elysian and Echo Park, and Glendale and Burbank. So it is a large study area. And as you may have guessed, there are a lot of raptors within that area. So red-tailed hawk. We're going to review a couple of our focal species, and red-tailed hawk is a very well-known raptor within our study area. It's one of the most common species that people see around Los Angeles. They're present year-round. They have a highly variable plumage, and they do keep their mates, and they nest in Los Angeles every year. And they haven't, historically, they've been in woodland habitats, but more recently, we find them in very urban and suburban areas. Cooper's hawk. And also, Nuri took a lot of these photos, and they're so wonderful. I think they give a really good showcase of what these species look like up close, because I think a lot of the times everybody sees them so far away. So I think it's great that we can see them so up close and all the details. So Cooper's hawk, really common urban hawk. You'll see them in a lot of your streets all around Los Angeles, especially in the San Fernando Valley. Formerly, they nested in riparian and oak woodland, but as I said, more commonly today, we find them in our urban streets. Red-shouldered hawk is my favorite for its forever mysterious ways. They are also a year-round resident. They are locally considered rare, and I think Dan is going to really dive into that with the data set a little bit later. And they reuse the nest from year to year, and they're very similar to, they hunt small mammals, birds, things like that. So very, very interesting nesting bird in Los Angeles. American kestrel, we have several territories within our study area. They are cavity nesters. Generally, they feed on insects and small rodents and birds. We have had pairs along the Los Angeles River and other more industrial areas of Los Angeles, especially downtown LA. And so another thing that I'd like to mention is the Kestrel Box program that we have in Griffith Park. It was a kind of a pilot study that we had, I think, a year or two ago. And so that is a way that you can encourage kestrels to nest in your areas through kestrel nest boxes. Peregrine falcon. All right. So these guys are cliff nesters. Commonly, they feast on birds with an incredible aerial dive, and it's wonderful to watch. This is the third year that they have that we've known about them in Griffith Park specifically. 2020 was the first year, and that attempt was not successful, but 2021 and 2022 were successful. And so I think that the peregrine falcon within our study area is actually a great showcase of proper management and handling, wildlife and human conflict, and then having a success story out of it. So I think that's something that we can really point to with this study as being a great success. And great horned owl. So we do have great horned owls all over the study area. Again, they're a year-round resident, primarily nocturnal, but very often seen during the day as well. They are a nocturnal hunter though. 90% of their diet is mammals, and they do use the nests of other raptors. So other hawks, they'll use their nest. And we've had so many, again, Dan can talk about this later in the results section, but we've had so many nest switches. One year it's a red tail, or, and the next year it's a great horned owl. So it sometimes makes data collection a little tricky, but always interesting. Barn owls. We don't have too many within our study area. They are widely distributed. They are cavity nesters, and we do know that we have them within the study area. They're just really difficult to study. Most of the time in the LA area, we see them nesting in palm trees, actually, in very old palm trees. And the way that an old palm tree kind of ends up filling out creates a cavity underneath that is perfect for them to have raised young. And so it's often very difficult to survey for those. And there are many, many palm trees in Los Angeles. So, we do know that they're here, and we do have pairs and territories. We'd like to focus on them more and learn more about their nesting habits. And then the last one, Western screech owl. So they are also cavity nesters, most often we hear about them a little bit kind of secondhand, or like a little bit later. I've heard mostly about them in the Mount Washington area in heavily wooded canyons, often I'll also hear about them nesting in roof eaves and things like that. So it seems like they have kind of taken to our urban habitat now. And again, this is similar to the barn owl. We do know that they're here, and we do have territories of them, but we just want to learn more about them as the years go on. So an opportunity for more research. Okay, so I just told you about all of these wonderful species that you may see within Los Angeles. It is a bustling urban area. And so how are our raptors using this area, right? So here's an example. Some of our nesting raptors are seen in an area like this, which is a canyon within the Santa Monica Mountains in Sherman Oaks, just south of Valley Vista. And it can look similar to this, where it's, canyon side and a little bit more urban wildlife interface. Or it can look like this, which is your very, generic residential area. This is a neighborhood in North Hollywood, but it definitely supports nesting raptors. And in particular, this would nest something like a Cooper's hawk. So the one that I mentioned earlier, that is more in our urban areas in Los Angeles. And then we can have raptors here. This is downtown LA, the middle of the city, and this is on Wilshire Boulevard, and it's kind of one of the more famous red-tailed hawks. There was a nest up on the side of the building, and it was catching pigeons. Oh shoot, I went too fast. Oh shoot. Oh, back. Oh, shoot. Well, it was eating pigeons. I apologize. I went too quickly. So anyways, that's just to show that raptors can use all of Los Angeles. And this map is another great example of that. So this map just shows how incredibly saturated the city is with raptors. And this is our mid-city area, from like mid-city to downtown LA subregion. And then Baldwin Hills is down below. And so most of these are Cooper's hawks, as you'll see, but there are some red-tailed hawks and red-shouldered hawks and great horned owls sprinkled within there. So it's heavily saturated, and we weren't really expecting this when we started the project 6 years ago, but I think it's a very happy accident. So some of the ways that we find these nests are using the citizen science apps like eBird or iNaturalist. There's a lot of citizen scientists out there, and they document sightings of these raptors all over Los Angeles. This is a map that's showing red-shouldered hawk sightings in the Los Angeles region. And I know Dan is on this app all season long, and he is often trolling, as I say, these citizen science apps, and he'll shoot each of us, sightings of, these birds in different areas where suspected territory may be. And sometimes, someone will even post maybe a behavior that is indicative of nesting, or even they'll post the nest itself or chicks or something like that. And so this has really been helpful over the last few years. Often we will follow pairs. So it can be a dangerous sport. And I know Jerry and I have spoken about it before. So, we're driving and we see a pair that we've been trying to scope out for maybe the last 2 years or something like that. And we will follow them and see which canyon they're in. And as soon as we think we can, park the car and get on foot and follow them to a certain degree, we do that. So following these pairs and seeing if they're perched across the street from a nest tree, or doing their dive and their swoop into a nest. So it's just learning these behaviors of the hawks and following them and watching their behavior, leading to a nest, hopefully. And sometimes it's super obvious. So Nuri got this photo. So this car was parked under an active red-tailed hawk nest in a condo complex. And a resident said, "Oh yeah, there's definitely hawks in the neighborhood." And lo and behold, there's a nest. So sometimes it is very obvious, and other times I know there's been territories where we've been chasing them for at least 2 years now. And then once we have an active territory, we scan the trees for stick nests and structures like the one that Nuri is pointing at here. Or maybe that's Dan's finger, I'm not quite sure. And so we do a finger photo, and we try and use these to send to volunteers. We send it to each other. We're trying to have more of a database of all of our nests so that we can just have a better handle on where they are, and can give that information readily so that you guys can go out and document these things for us, which you guys do so well. And then the last thing that I'll discuss here before passing it off to Dan is just this wonderful thing that Nuri has really been in charge of and has really bolstered the study as well. In addition to all those citizen science apps, Nuri has really been a proponent of our Facebook page and our next, scanning Nextdoor and things like that, and getting the word out there to all of our kind of local cities and local neighborhoods. And if you have a hawk on your block, you let us know. And so Nuri is really good at chasing down those leads, which sometimes do or don't end up with a nest, but often end up with a very interested citizen scientist. So I think it's been really successful. And so now I'm going to pass it off to Dan to talk about the data.
Okay. I'm trying to do everything in the right order here. Let's see. Slideshow. All right. That seems to have worked. Thank you, Courtney. So now it's part 2 of the talk, the study results. So this year we revisited over 400 known raptor territories, and they included almost 200 Cooper's hawks. You can read it yourself, 161 red tails. Interestingly enough, more Coopers than red tails, which is, in the last year or two that flipped. So initially we had a lot more red tails. We're now just finding a lot of Cooper's hawks. And then many fewer red shoulders and great horned owls. So our rate of finding new nests is slowing, which is actually good. We think we're saturating the whole LA basin, at least north of Exposition Park, and we only added 9 new red-tailed hawks this past year. So, given that we had well over 100, I think we are really finding a lot of these raptors, particularly big ones like red tails. Okay. Let's see. All right, so looking at each species, this year we decided to do a lot more analysis, some data analysis of what we had, because starting in 2020, if you remember from last year, our activity really exploded. We just had a lot more observations. It was the height of COVID. We could get around the city a lot better, and we found many, many more nests than we had the first 3 years of the study. So a lot of what I'll be talking about in the data is the last 3 years. And after 3 years, I figure I can start making some graphs. It'll get interesting. So we found that red-tailed hawks actually maintained fewer active territories in 2022 than the year prior. And 2022 saw the fewest fledged nest over the last 3 years, with several dozen pairs either absent from known territories or abandoning nests midway through the season. So you can see those numbers. We had just over 100 active, but only around 70 fledged. So where did those go? We're not sure. Okay, looking at Cooper's hawks, I think for some reason that is still red-tailed hawks. Hold on. That's odd. Okay, it must not have added the slide, but basically Cooper's hawks maintained fewer territories in 2022 than in the 2 prior years and fledged fewer young than in 2021, but proportionally more of these 2022 nests fledged than in prior years. And that is not shown in this graph, but it's in our final report, which will be up on the website probably tomorrow. So let's look at red-shouldered hawks. We had more active territories in 2022, but roughly the same number of nests fledged young. So that resulted in a proportionally lower fledging rate than the other 2 species. And then for great horned owls, which I didn't graph those because most of the great horned owl territories we found through fledglings. And so basically all of those, just about all of those were deemed to have fledged. And then looking across species, it's going to move all your faces. Looking at the number of territories that fledged young for each species, the peak in each species fledging rate was higher in different years, but in 2020, it showed the highest rate of fledging overall across all the species. We had about 84%. So that's that dashed blue line. So something happened in 2020. I wonder what it could be. That caused everything to fledge a little higher. I don't know if it's statistically significant because we're only looking at 5 or 6 years of data on either side. So we'll see. Future years we may see these numbers drop. One thing I was really interested in this is reoccupancy from the prior year. So nests that were active one year, how did they do the next year? So I plotted those, and that's pretty interesting. For the 3 focal species, we see a strikingly similar pattern for red-tailed hawks and Cooper's hawk territories, but they have different base rates. A lot more red-tailed hawks were reoccupied by Cooper's hawks just in general. There was a different pattern for red-shouldered hawks. And what we don't have here is the number of nests. We had many fewer red-shouldered nests than the other 2. So I suspect that's just noise in the data because of that smaller sample size with red-shouldered hawks. So believe the red-tail and Coopers, and we shall see about red shoulders. Well, let's look at annual nesting success now that we have a few years. That's the fledging rate on territories that had been active the prior year. We see that about 60% of red-tailed hawks that fledge young in a given year also fledged young the following year. And they were the highest of overall, year after year of all the 4 species. This varied from a low of 51% in 21-22, but in 2019-2020, we had about 75% fledging rate. This variation, again, was a lot higher for red-shouldered hawk. The mean was lower. An average of 41% Cooper's hawk nests fledged the year after they were active, but only 39% of great horned owls on average fledged the following year over the 6 years we looked at. All right, well, let's look at productivity. So if you look at mean chicks per nest, the drop in productivity after 2020, it may not be statistically significant, but something may be going on that a few years might clarify. It's interesting that all 4 of our focal species saw drops in the number of chicks per nest after 2020. But they were also lower before 2020. On the other hand, we were a lot more diligent in our data collection, and we just kind of learned more about how to do this thing after 2020. So it's a bit of a mess, but hopefully, again, a couple more years should clarify that. Still kind of an interesting pattern how all those species drop. And Cooper's hawk picks up in 2022, but it still seems to be dropping. Well, that got me thinking that something might be happening with rainfall. And I looked at the different species, didn't see much of a pattern until I got to red-tailed hawk. And I plotted the number of 1-chick nests. So we noticed, I mentioned a lot of these red-tailed territories we had, the pairs never settled down. And so the nests were active last year, but not active this year. We had a big chunk of nests that we just didn't have any birds at, or we had 1 birds kind of standing around all spring. And we also had a lot of 1-chick nests, and the highest of the 6 years of the study. So I just looked at that factor, proportion, the proportion of 1-chick nests to all the other number of chick nests, 2, 3, and 4, and plotted those against the prior year's rainfall. And I found this interesting pattern where, one goes up, the other goes down. So this has been observed looking at precipitation in northern goshawk in Europe. And I don't know that anyone's done it with red-tailed hawks. Like, red-tailed hawks aren't studied that much compared to, say, peregrine falcons, but we only have 1 peregrine pair. So, someone's got to do red-tails. But, these red-tails are foraging in natural habitats, a lot of them. Some are foraging on urban pigeons and squirrels, but the majority of our red-tailed nests are eating ground squirrels and rabbits in the hills. So those hilly areas around LA are really susceptible to drops in precipitation, the drought we're having. All right. So humans cause many threats to raptors, as a lot of you know. We list some of these here. We'll be talking about them in a sec. But humans can also help with rescue and rehabilitation. So even though it's not on the scale that other things operate on, it really feels good to save a raptor. Our outreach director, Nurit, volunteers in wildlife rehab. And now she's going to share some of her examples from this year and also talk about how you can support our urban raptors.
Thank you, Dan. All right, let's see if we can get the right screen share here. So, starting with kind of the threats to our raptors, we will spare you the more difficult photos. We did have some mortalities this year. And unfortunately, one of those, which we believe was due to rodenticides, was at this nest. These are 2 young red-shouldered hawk nestlings. And there was a dead red-shouldered hawk male that was found near this nest area and was tested for rodenticides. The cause of death was not confirmed to be rodenticides, but we do believe that that may have been the cause, because the raptor did test positive for 3 different rodenticides. So, you know, raptors are very cooperative parents. I've personally seen red shoulders take turns incubating and switch off at the nest. You know, they take turns hunting. So it's very difficult for a single parent raptor to be able to raise more than 1 chick, and there's probably not enough food. So this nest, unfortunately, only one of the chicks survived once they were a single parent. And I do want to make sure, can everyone see the full photo screen? Am I sharing the correct screen here? Hopefully. Anyone? Hopefully. Okay. I can't hear anyone, but I'll assume that's a yes.
Yeah, it looks good, Nuri.
Okay, thank you. All right, so another threat that was on Dan's slide was trimming. So this has been a consistent issue as well. We've definitely seen some nests that we monitored last year that were not there this year at the start of the season because they were trimmed out. And we had a late season trim that upset a lot of neighbors. I don't know if anyone from Mount Washington is on the call tonight, but I got calls from some residents in that area that a long-standing red-tail nest had been illegally removed. So in case everyone is not aware, it is illegal to remove a raptor nest, even when it's not active off-season. They are protected. And so unfortunately, in this case, the residents tried to warn the tree company of that, but they were under orders from an off-site landlord, and they didn't find us and our number until after the fact. So it was too late to actually stop the trimming. So what you see here is the nest last year. And this was actually a nest that had been active for 10 years. So the residents felt very connected to the raptors, like they were family. And then this is afterwards. So they heavily trimmed and ended up removing the raptor nest. So that is a violation. Later in the chat, I can share the CalTip number. It's good to keep handy. It's a 24/7 number. So if you catch someone doing illegal trimming, you can call and a warden will come out and enforce. So to try and prevent these kinds of instances, Courtney and I both helped with a workshop for arborists called Tree Care for Birds and Wildlife. It's hosted in partnership with the Western Society of International Arboriculture, I believe. So this is Courtney teaching this group and showing them, actually there was a acorn woodpecker nest in the distance that they're looking at. It was an all-day workshop, and probably 60 or 70 arborists from around Southern California were there. And, you know, I was very happy to see a sign of this kind of education working when I was in Culver City searching for a Cooper's hawk nest that had been a little bit tricky, but I had a good instinct about it. I found some of the whitewash and I found the nest tree, and then I went around to the other side of the tree after finding the nest, and here was a sign that it was a nest tree. So it was sort of obvious, but also really exciting to see. So what you see here is it says tree maintenance delayed, birds or other wildlife nesting in trees. So this is what we want to see more of. Tree trimming can take place in a tree that has a raptor nest as long as the nest is not removed, but it should always take place outside of nesting season. So like September to February. So this is what we hope to see more of around the city. So not all stories of interaction with humans end poorly. I mentioned the loss of the red-shouldered to rodenticides. We did have a loss of a great horned owl as well that we suspect was rodenticides. But sometimes humans can come to the rescue. So this was a young great horned owlet that left the nest a bit early, and this is in a very busy park in Sepulveda Basin. So somebody reported the owlet and took it to California Wildlife Center, but they checked it out and it was healthy. And I was able to get a hold of them. And since we knew where the nest was, we were able to get it back where it belonged. So how do you do that? So LA Animal Services has this amazing new rescue team, or relatively new, called SMART. And we worked with Officer Jose Navarro and his team, and they were able to put the owlet back in the nest, even though it's extremely high in the tree. So they use the truck to get partway up, and then they climb. So here's showing her inside this little bag is where the owlet is. And so they go up into the tree, and then they've got the owlet in the bag at the end of this long stick. and they put it back into the nest. So Jim Hanlon, who may be on the call today, is an incredible photographer in this Pulveda Basin. And so he captured this photo of the owlet once it was safely back in its nest. There's the bag that brought it back up there. And then this was weeks later as the owlet was learning how to fly. And then months later, as some of you who've monitored owl nests might know, great horned owls, pretty soon in the year, like a few months after fledging, they start to look a lot like the adults. So this is that same owlet a few months later, a beautiful portrait. So definitely a happy story. We had another really incredible experience this year. So this is a young red-tailed hawk from one of our most urban nests that is right at a freeway exit or freeway area. And so Asa Shumskas, who is married to one of our volunteers, Francis Tate, who I saw on the call, was walking his daughter to school and saw this injured hawk. And thankfully, unfortunately, not everyone who finds injured wildlife is married to a raptor study volunteer, but in this case, it was really lucky. So he reached out to Francis, who got in touch with us. Courtney was able to coordinate the capture, and I drove this injured red tail out to Ojai Raptor Center. So there are some wildlife rehabilitation centers in Los Angeles, like California Wildlife Center, but Ojai Raptor Center is really the place where raptors need to go. So most others will transfer them there. And so I took it all the way out there to get, fastest care. The raptor did have quite a few injuries, different fractures, eye injury, et cetera. But after a number of weeks in rehabilitation and their incredible flight cages where it could practice flying before being released, this young juvenile female red-tailed hawk was actually ready for release. So injured in June and released in the beginning of August. So we have a video here from the release. The volunteers who coordinated the rescue and the volunteer for this nest were able to join, but we can share that moment with you. That was pretty incredible. And this is Asa's video. So there's just nothing like seeing a raptor in flight after rehabilitation. It's really an incredible moment. So we released her in a park that wasn't too far from the nesting territory. And she settled into the tree and started to explore a bit. So, oops, hopefully I can get out of this one and get to the next slide. There we go. So here's a close-up of her up in the tree once she was set free, which was really incredible. So how can you support raptors and wildlife in your homes, in your neighborhoods? I know not everyone on the call tonight is a volunteer. So number one, definitely do not use any rodenticides or poisons. It's just not worth it. There are better ways to manage rodents. Obviously, we understand that you do need to, but mechanical traps or electrical traps or other methods are always preferable. A lot of these rodenticides have secondary impacts on wildlife. They result in mange in our mammals. I'm sure you've seen, horrible, sad stories about our mountain lions. So just don't do it. And please educate your neighbors about it too. You definitely want to avoid trimming, removing trees or construction during nesting season. So February through August, if you have to do work during that time, you should hire a biologist to do a nesting bird survey and make sure that you're not going to disturb any nest, raptor or otherwise. Other ways to kind of support wildlife in your yard, avoid leaf blowers, allow leaf litter. That can help with the songbirds that like to forage. Plant native plants in your yard. That definitely can support our overall ecosystem, which includes our raptors. And then please do educate your neighbors on these practices. There's a great website I can put in the chat afterwards called treecareforbirds.com that has tons of best practices. That's who hosted the workshop for the arborists that Courtney and I were involved in. And yeah, there's a lot of great resources, so we'll share a few. Those of you who aren't volunteers, a great way to get started observing raptors is get yourself a pair of binoculars. Dan did a great review in the New York Times. You can look up the best binoculars for birds, nature, and the outdoors with some good starter pairs. And then once you start observing, you can share those observations. So Courtney mentioned earlier that we rely on citizen science a lot of times to find new territories. So if you see raptors, you can definitely email us direct tips like through our outreach, but you can also submit those observations through eBird or iNaturalist. There's a lot of really great apps out there. And for those who are starting to fall in love with raptors like us, there are some really nice specialized raptor resources. The app Raptor ID is specific to raptors and has really great photos from different angles of all the different raptors that you'll see. And of course, there are field guides as well. But one of the best things you can do, of course, is to sign up and be a Raptor study volunteer. So for those on the call tonight who aren't a study volunteer, you can fill out the application on our website, friendsofgriffithpark.org/raptor study, and we'll be in touch later this year, and there will be a training early in 2023. So speaking of the 2023 season, I'm going to give it back to our study director, Dan Cooper. I do just want to say thank you again, not only to the volunteers, but also to, Courtney mentioned I've been involved in a lot of outreach. So I know I saw names in the attendees of folks who've given us tips and who are neighbors who contributed. So thank you all so much. And I'm going to give it back to Dan to talk about the 2023 season and what's next.
Okay, thanks, Nurit. Share the screen. And, okay, so for 2023, where am I? There I am. For 2023, we are really interested in exploring Nest Watch, which is a project that Cornell Lab of Ornithology has been doing for many years. And each year it's getting a little better and better. And so what we'd like to do is move some of our data, maybe with taking a couple of the study areas, such as the Baldwin Hills or Sepulveda Basin, and put it into Nest Watch and allow volunteers on the project to just enter data themselves. We don't know that we want to do the whole study this way. We've already entered our annual data ourselves, but we're just going to explore ways to maybe let Nest Watch work for us. And the way it works is kind of like we're running the study, but it's just a lot prettier and more organized. So you can georeference everything, describe the tree. You can add photos. You can add photos, like 3 photos a day if you want. So it could be really interesting. Like I said, we're already in Nest Watch. It's just that the volunteers don't have access to the Griffith Park and LA data in Nest Watch. So Courtney and I gave a presentation of this study down at the American Ornithological Conference this summer in San Juan, Puerto Rico, which was pretty fascinating. We gave a little workshop with some of our colleagues from the Caribbean who are doing Nest community science studies down there. And who knows, maybe we'll even have an in-person training like we used to have. Remember those? So I really want to echo Nurit's thanks to everyone who participated this year and who will participate in future years, and particularly to Jerry Hans and Friends of Griffith Park. They've just been tremendously supportive of the entire project, not only keeping it going financially, but just talking to the media and posting the articles and really keeping the excitement going year after year. It's been a really joy. It's really been a joy to work on this project. I look forward to many years of it. So I think now we're going to open it up to questions with a sleepy great horned owl. So stop sharing.
Thanks, Dan, Courtney, and Nurit. That was terrific. And I just want to also thank Recreation and Parks staff. They've been very supportive, and our park rangers in particular that have helped us, protect that peregrine nesting site. It's really incredible that they've really pitched in and supported our study. So we're going to do questions and answers. So put them into that box. Yeah, and it seems like there's a lot of interest in tree trimming. So we can start off with that. And the first question is whether we contact individual cities about tree and nest removals. And I think, Nurit, maybe you can take that one.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have been doing more proactive outreach now. you'll read in the final report, a lot of our nests are on private property, but we do have nests in some public parks and street trees that are managed by different cities. So we have done some more proactive outreach where we share with those cities the location of the nests. So Rec and Parks for LA knows where the nests are. We've also talked to some other cities. So we're trying to take a more proactive approach to avoid issues like you're talking about with what happened with the red-shouldered nest. And because some of these are private properties, we've also started doing outreach to some key, like that whitewash covered car that you saw earlier was in a condo complex. So we spoke with the HOA and the condo complex owners, made sure they knew about the nests and what the rules were. We've also talked to a couple cemeteries where we have nests. So we're trying to be more proactive on that. And I'm going to put the link in the chat to Tree Care for Birds, that resource I mentioned on the tree trimming. That's got a great guide that you can share with anybody who needs to know about responsible tree trimming practices.
Thanks for that question, Sue. And Erin, along the same lines, she'd like to know what she can do about tree trimming that occurs during nesting city that's done by the city. And she doesn't name the city.
Yeah, so I also mentioned that there's an enforcement number. Here is the link in the chat to CalTIP. This is a 24/7 line. If you click on that link, there's an 800 number. So if you catch the trimming in action that's inappropriate, you can call that line if you know it's a nest that's being disturbed. If it's just happening at the wrong time of year and you're not sure if there are nests, I would reach out to that entity. If it's a park, check for the Parks and Recreation Department or that city. You can let them know what the laws are, send them the Tree Care for Birds, resource, and make sure that they're aware of better practices.
And Z would like to know what type of trees red-tailed hawks like to nest in. Dan?
I know that one. So, we didn't talk about tree type in the presentation, although the report is full of tree type and the prior year's reports, if you go on to the Friends of Griffith Park website and read those. But the short answer is the tallest trees around. That's what they like to nest in. And those tend to be Canary Island pines or Italian stone pines sometimes, but Canary Island pine is really the champion tall tree of LA. And they were planted in the 60s, and you can actually watch old movies from the 60s and see little ones planted along the streets of LA and Hollywood. And now they're huge. So eucalyptus, but we're cutting a lot of those down. So yeah, that's what they were planted in. I want to also say with the tree trimming by the city, I don't know if Courtney mentioned the workshop she gave with Rec and Parks staff, which we did for the first time this year, Courtney? Here, you're muted.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. So it was with the forestry department, which is the Division of Recreation and Parks. So at least within recreation, they're very aware of the nesting season and very aware of best management practices during the nesting season. Yeah.
So next question, Brenda asks, what are the best trees to plant in backyards for raptors?
Well, I'll take that. I would say that what we've found is the local raptors do have plenty of trees to nest in. So what they may not have is as much prey. And I think that I wouldn't worry too much about planting trees for raptors in a backyard. But I would think about, as we we're talking about, what to do with the giant trees in your neighborhood. LA is only getting hotter. And I'm not a big proponent of non-native trees, but I do think that these big monster trees that are in neighborhoods really need people defending them. And I think the study has really brought that home for all of us, that they not only providing shade for people, but yeah, that's what I would do. And of course, if your house backs up to open space, I wouldn't go back there and plant trees and chaparral. Like, that's not what we want to see. We want to save all the native habitat too.
This is a little off topic, but what time is the pizza party on Sunday?
Well, we will send out an email to all volunteers about the pizza party. and they will have a time and an RSVP link so that we can get the proper amount of food.
Right. Thank you. And what do raptor eggs look like? How big are they in color?
Nareed?
Yeah, sure, I can speak to that. I believe they're all white from what I've seen. And they are bigger than a songbird, smaller than an ostrich.
Look, we don't see a lot of eggs, guys.
Yeah, we don't, but there's a lot of good photos online. Interestingly, we have had reported or seen eggshells.
Right.
So some birds do remove eggshells from the nest to avoid attracting predators, I think is the reason. So I have had people send me a photo of a large eggshell found under a great horned owl nest, for example, but we haven't seen a lot of that. So yeah, I would just Google, red-tailed hawk, egg, and you can find some good examples. If you're not aware, there are some fabulous nest cams out there where you can watch the entire process. There's the big bear bald eagles are really fun. There's a number, the peregrine falcons in Berkeley have a cam. So, if you like to have something on while you're working or you're stuck at home, I definitely recommend checking out, just Google like nest cam raptor and you'll find some good ones. And then you can actually see the entire process, eggs hatching, the babies, the whole thing.
We're actually getting some tips for next year in our question and answer box. That's great. And I know that Woking Way stretch very well, and I know there's some raptors around there. Trevor asks, if we volunteer as an observer this year, do we need to reapply again next year?
Yes, please.
Yes, the answer is yes. And Cindy asks, this is jumping around, how can we help rescue and reduce the use of rodenticides? Maybe a public awareness campaign. Friends of Griffith Park has done a lot of work on that. And we actually worked with nonprofits across the state to get AB 1788 passed. And that eliminated the use for most uses of the secondary anticoagulants. And that began January 1st of 2021. But yet, we have this red-shouldered hawk that was found dead, and it tested positive for 3, and all 3 of those were second gen, the most potent of the coagulants. So I would say, yeah, we want to do more outreach. And we're actually considering offering some signs for people to post in their own residential neighborhood. And they're pretty nifty. It's like declaring it a wildlife area on your street. So we'll have more information about that real soon. Question on how do they survive heat waves like the one we just had and the drought? Any trends there? Any statistics that we can really find at this point, Dan?
Yeah, we looked at precipitation and drops in precipitation. So drought, we had that interesting pattern about red tail, and so it may be that one reason they're having one chick nest is that's an adaptation to drought. It's just that the one chick will require fewer resources than 3 chicks. So why not have one? These birds have survived a very long time, and they're still seem to be thriving in LA. So they're obviously pretty resilient to that type of thing. Heat also, there have been heat waves in the past, but these prolonged heat waves, we will almost certainly see some major effects. And I think last year, Nari, do you want to describe what we saw with Cooper's hawks last year?
Yeah, I was just going to speak nationally in case anyone had seen the news. Last year, there was a hawk apocalypse, they were calling it, because there were some major springtime heat waves in the Pacific Northwest. And hot weather can actually cause hawks to fledge early. So the nestlings get too crowded and hot in the nest and they'll jump out of the nest, which they can injure themselves. It's, they're fledging much earlier than they're supposed to. So rehab centers in the Pacific Northwest were completely flooded with fledglings, more than they normally would be in the spring. And so the heat, probably by this time of year, they should be able to fend for themselves a little better, but heat waves in the spring can be very dangerous for our raptors.
Back to tree trimming. If a nest is inactive, is it a protected tree?
No, you can trim, you just can't remove the nest. So if there is no raptor in the nest and it's after nesting season, trimming is allowed. But one thing we've seen that's a problem, particularly for Cooper's hawks and red-shouldereds, they really like their nest to be pretty hidden. So we have seen trim jobs that completely exposed the nest, and then the raptors didn't want to use it anymore. So this is a little bit more refined, but if you know anyone who's going to try and trim around a raptor nest, please do educate them that they should leave quite a bit of cover. So like in that workshop that Courtney and I did, what they instruct the arborists is actually like almost like leave an entire kind of like circle around the nest. You really don't want to expose the nest like that.
And a parent wannabe volunteer asks if they filled out an application earlier this year, will they be contacted?
Courtney?
Yes, they will be contacted. I wasn't sure I was going to take.
We're pretty
Probably
good.
by Courtney.
Yes, we will be contacting you. So generally towards the end of the year in December, we reach out to people who have filled out that Google form, and we reach out to prior season volunteers and ask them if they'd like to volunteer again. And we just kind of do it towards the end of the year. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And Peter asks whether sharp-shinned hawks in Griffith Park during winter, spring, summer, fall, are they transitory or are they resident nesters, Dan?
Yeah. Well, if you probably didn't see one in summer, if no one's been able to photograph a sharp-shinned hawk in LA basically from the end of May till the end of August. So they're pretty much absent. Their nesting range is basically like, goshawk. So high Sierra, north, and then actually they do nest along the coast down to about the Santa Cruz Mountains, but they're pretty common in winter. So they're hard to identify, but this time of year, our first ones really don't appear till about October. So you're safe. You're safe.
Where do the hawks go outside of nesting season? What happened to my Cooper's hawks?
Well, we're going to try and find out. I'm actually starting to do some more formal related research where we might actually, so there's a biologist, Pete Bloom in Orange County, who's kind of the leading raptor biologist around, and he's been doing this 50 years, has a lot of interesting data. So he's going to help us try to GPS tag some of our Cooper's hawks so we can find out where the juveniles go. He did that with red-tailed hawks down in Orange County and actually found that they were leaving, the juveniles would fly all the way out to Great Basin and then come back and nest near their home territory. So we're very curious to find out what our Cooper's hawks are doing. Some other Cooper's hawk studies where they do tag them and actually put GPS tags on them. Dan and I talked to a fellow who has a Cooper's hawk study up in Seattle, and some of his hawks were all the way down to Oakland, I think. So they were moving quite a bit, and one was even all the way out in the desert in Nevada, I think, when it was recovered. Dan, anything more to add, or Courtney on that?
We'll see.
Yeah, I guess we'll find out. So we don't know 100%.
Good question. Are there any youth raptor programs available in the area that a family can engage? Speaking for our own, we require parents, but they're certainly welcome to work with their children as monitors for our nests. Any others that you know of?
Yeah, well, Pasadena Audubon has a young birders program, so definitely talk to them. There's also not raptors, but there American Birding Association sponsors young birder camps in Arizona and Colorado. So if they're really into birds, that would be fun for them.
Okay.
Yeah, there's also a number of organizations that have education birds. These are birds that were like rehab birds that couldn't be released. So Placerita Canyon Nature Center has some birds like that where kids can go and actually like see them up close. And there's a number of organizations that have education birds like that. Ojai Raptor Center does educational programs. So there's a lot of programs where kids can actually get a close-up look, maybe even hold an owl and that sort of a thing.
It's another good question. When my Cooper's hawks built their nests, the sycamore was bare, and that's how this family found it. Did the hawks know that leaves would eventually conceal that nest?
It's a philosophical question. I don't know.
I think they're pretty smart.
Yeah,
I would say yes.
I would say yes, but I would also say they keep surprising us. So there was one nest this year that got reported to us, and we had driven by this street, and there's no way in heck we would have guessed that this tree would have had a Cooper's hawk nest. It was a mostly dead ficus with no leaf cover. And all I can figure out is that they probably were nesting there for years. I actually went into Google Maps and saw whitewash in prior years. So they probably nested when it was a fully leafed tree and just kept nesting even as the tree was dying. But, you know, they still were active there this year, even with no leaf cover. So we also had a Cooper's hawk nest last year that I found in a palm tree, which again, wouldn't have predicted in a million years. So there's just still more to learn.
One of our viewers tonight has a juvenile great horned hawk on their street, and it screeches every night, and they're wondering when to expect it to transition into a hooting call.
Courtney, do you want to take that one?
No, I do not want to take that one.
So that's probably not a great horned owl. That's probably a barn owl. You know, owls have a lot of vocalizations, and great. We don't know what this bird you're seeing is, but juveniles have a lot of weird screeches. So if you're positive it's a juvenile making that weird, it's almost like a growl. I can't really describe what it is, but anyway, I don't know. It might take about 6 more months till it's an adult, but just know that there are barn owls all over LA, and they make a screeching sound. So,
yeah, there are a lot of interesting vocalizations that great horns make. And there's a really cool website I found that I just put in the chat that has like, I don't know, 15 different calls, clicks and weird noises they make. So you could listen to those and see if you recognize the one, and that might help you determine if it's a barn owl or a great horned. But yeah, they do make a lot of weird noises as juveniles. And so probably I would say they're not really going to start hooting and courting until the following fall at the earliest. You know, the great horns, usually you start to hear them make those mating calls and hooting to each other in like October, I would say. Anyone hear it any earlier than that? September maybe, but yeah.
Yeah, a lot of weird calls. I call them honking.
Yeah, there's like a weird honky one too.
Another question, have you ever found a Cooper's hawk nest that was unused for a season and then reused the following year? And definitely they take years off. And in fact, Dan writes about that in the survey results present in the final report, which, by the way, is on our website already.
Yay.
In the Raptor
we did this year in Sherman Oaks. So we've definitely had them move around a lot, but that's the one that comes to mind for sure. This year, you know, we were checking the territory, and I just randomly decided to check the old year nest, and it was not active last year. It was active in 2020, and then they used it again in 2022. So that was pretty.
We're finding that with other species too. I mean, red tails are doing that too. They're vanishing one year, and I mean vanishing, like not on the territory. So yeah, it's interesting.
Chiming in on that last question we had about great horns, they definitely are great horns. They've seen them. They're not bound.
Okay, we believe you. We believe you.
Yeah, we definitely believe.
Yeah, they do have weird noises. So thank you for confirming. And someone else noted that they're making calls now. You know, I thought I heard my great horns now, so maybe it's a lot earlier than October. So what are we, September? Yeah.
I'm hearing that. I've heard them all summer, so.
Yeah, it's year round.
Yeah.
In our house, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, just to clarify, they make the single call, but they start like courting each other and calling, like where you
Right.
hear two of them, I feel like is more like September.
I know ospreys can be found along the LA River. Why are they not monitored in this study?
Because they're not nesting. So we have that question every year, actually. What are ospreys doing? And we even had people convinced they were nesting and even showed us where the nest was supposed to be. But no, they live year round in LA and they live year round in the LA River. But they breed as close as coastal Orange County, I think, and no farther north. So someday they probably will breed here, but they're just not doing it yet.
A question about DNA samples, if we'll ever be doing that in our study. And I believe the answer is no, because we really don't touch the raptors at all.
Yeah, in the study that I'm going to do with the Cooper's hawks, we might, when we're banding or tagging, we might take blood or feather samples.
Well, they're looking at eDNA, so I assume like in soil or something, but.
Oh, I think they might have meant DNA, but yeah, eDNA is more like tiny particles from the soil, like under the nests, which we're not doing right now. Yeah.
What area in Southern California has the highest density of American kestrel?
Oh, so we didn't talk much about kestrels, but the report talks about them a little bit. It turns out that kestrels, the only breeding territories we have are in the far eastern part of the study area in the old neighborhoods in East LA, including in old cemeteries and along Mission Road and El Sereno in that area. So the last active nest we had was in downtown LA. But they're not in the valley nesting and they're not nesting in the Santa Monicas. So that's what we got to do, go east and south.
A question about Pasadena, South Pasadena, Arroyo. We have lots of raptors, but finding the nest can be difficult. Any suggestions for finding the nest more easily when the terrain can be tough and houses are in the way and backyards unable to access? That's our challenge.
Yeah, that is hard.
Every year.
I mean, Pasadena's outside our study. So if you're just looking for your own, I mean, not to be Debbie Downer, but I don't recommend trying to find raptor nests just for fun because it disturbs them. So our volunteers are instructed to only visit once every couple of weeks. If you're just kind of doing it on your own, maybe don't look for them. But if you needed to, you know,
say she really, really wants to, though.
Yeah, if you really, really wanted to, I would say get high, not like on drugs, but find elevation. Oftentimes what we do, and Dan's really the master of this in the mountains, Courtney's amazing too, but it's, you know, in these hilly territories, you want to try and find a street that's above the area where you think the raptor might be. And then hopefully that might help you. It's not really useful for Cooper's hawks. And that's part of why we don't have a lot of Cooper's nests in the Santa Monica Mountains that we've found by comparison. But a red tail nest, you should be able to see from a canyon over or, you know, a street over. I don't know, Courtney, Dan, you're both better at that. Anything to add?
Well, Courtney loves not finding red-shouldered hawk.
Ouch. Okay. No, yeah. Cooper's hawks, I base a lot of nest finding for Coopers on behavior, but then it's tough when the terrain is tough. So no, I don't have any recommendations beyond what you have, but yeah, tough, and maybe don't engage in it. Yeah, heavily like Nuri recommended.
Question, what are some raptors' mating behaviors? And I'm sure there's a lot of different ones we could bring up, but I guess the question is directed to what are we looking for in order to find a nearby nest? Thoughts on that, Courtney?
Thoughts are, we have a raptor manual that we published, I think, what, 2 years ago, Dan? that goes into great detail about raptor mating behavior. We touched on it briefly during this presentation. So you can look for a lot of their behavior. They'll sit, it depends on the raptor, but they'll sit in trees staring at the nest. They'll do a very particular swooping motion to get into the nest. There's just, yeah, I don't know. I could go, it's per species. I notice different things. So,
yeah. Could you discuss as to what to do when a deceased raptor is found? And I can speak to that. Contact us right away, and we'll try to be Johnny on the spot. Hopefully, it's a freshly dead bird where we can collect it and immediately, put it on ice, and then we send it in. Friends of Griffith Park has done this quite a few times, not only with raptors, but with other animals where we suspect rodenticides, and then send it into UC Davis Veterinary Laboratory for analysis. It takes a few weeks to get the results. So definitely let us know when that happens. More tips here.
Yeah, someone had our Coopers in our mystery territory, Melrose and Los
Yeah,
Palos.
we never solved that one.
Yeah, all four of us have searched West Hollywood and this sort of Fairfax base of the Santa Monicas so many times and have very little to show for it. So I know a lot of you live there, have friends who live in that area. So yes, keep sending us the tips.
Yeah.
And it takes days to find these nests. Often, I was just joking with Courtney about can't find them every day, day after day. And we have combined, I've spent 7-8 days on a single Cooper's territory in that area. And it's just,
yeah, I mean, with Cooper's nests, a lot of the times you can only see the nest standing under the tree. It's really not visible otherwise. And so with backyards, if we don't have access, a lot of these territories we can't solve. It often is backyards. But to answer the second part of your question, Sherry, I don't think they commonly hang out with parrots. It sounds like that was sort of a coincidence that the Cooper's hawk happened to be flying with the parrots. I don't know if parrots mob like corvids or anything, but yeah, they don't normally travel with flocks of parrots or anything. And
if a raptor a deceased raptor has been found, the question is how are we contacted? Any way you can get through to us. Our phone numbers, Narit's phone number is on our website. Email, we're very responsive to emails. So just let us know as soon as possible.
And us being friends of Griffith Park or the Raptor study or either one.
Yeah.
Contact information on the Raptor page at Friends of Griffith Park.
Yeah, I just put my cell in the chat. I use it professionally, so don't be afraid. Call, text. If you have an injured raptor, for sure, please call because I can respond faster that way. And for dead, you're welcome to contact me and I can get in touch with Jerry if he's closer to pick it up, or I can go pick it up.
Right. And regarding that manual, question is, where can that be accessed? And I believe it's on our website.
No, we send it to the volunteers, I think, right, Courtney? We don't post that.
We didn't post the manual?
I don't think so. It's more like a volunteer manual. So I think we just email it. We could review and see if it would be okay to post. There's a lot of details about how to find nests. I don't know that it's a good public posting, but I'll defer to Dan on that.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll review it. We'll have the panel decide.
Yes.
Yeah. And let's see, we've answered 31 questions here already. One more question. Has a crow or raven ever been found near a red-tailed hawk nest, assuming a raven nest has been found near a red-tailed hawk nest? And proximity-wise, they can be pretty close.
Well, and they will take over other raptor nests, probably not as much red tail, but we've seen corvids take over Cooper's nests and vice versa. I would say somewhat frequently, or certainly more than once. And they definitely do mob our raptors. I think a number of volunteers have probably answered or commented before that they've seen a gang of crows, hanging out with a raptor. In fact, we've found some raptors that way. That's a good way to find raptors, is if the crows are going nuts. So I was recently in Portland and wanted to see a barred owl for the first time. There was one reported in this park. It was a juvenile. And I went to the park and heard crows making a bunch of noise. So I went over, and sure enough, there was the owl. So that's often, especially when a raptor is outside its regular territory, when they start to move around and migrate and they end up in a new territory where they don't belong, you'll hear the crows just go completely nuts, or the ravens.
Okay, I think we've come to the end here. Dan, do you have any final words before I have my final word?
Oh, thanks so much. These are great questions. And yeah, we enjoy this every year. Thanks.
Okay, again, thanks so much for all the volunteers, and be sure to get your applications in to be a volunteer for the 2023 session. And yes, this recording will be available on our website, hopefully within a few days. So again, thanks to our team, Dan, Courtney, and Narit, and we'll call it an evening at this point. Thank you very much.
Bye, guys.
Thanks all.